Hey everyone, it's Wolfram here, and I'm going to do a video on how to clear Dead Space today. But before I get to the main part of the video, and if you want to just jump straight to that, I'm going to do an update as to what things have been going on recently. The timestamp for the start of the tutorial on Dead Space is in the description. I'll leave a time here, so if you want to just jump to that, that's absolutely fine. I'll take it through running the footage at normal speed in the background at the moment, but when I take it into the tutorial, I'll speed through various bits of it, so I'm not leaving it all up, but it should all be there for you to see. What's been happening recently is I've had a couple of huge setbacks. I lost my Cinnaball again. That I flew into a gate camp when I was solo, didn't get out of it, made a complete hash of it. Um, well, those things happen. You've seen me lose my Cinnaball before. It was a 2 billion ISK loss. I'm not going to put the loss mail. It doesn't really matter because that's how much it was, and I don't know what to do really because um, it's a loss in the sense that I really like the Cinnaball. It's a great ratting ship. I've really used it loads for clearing normal anomalies. I've had my views about it in special anomalies. You'll see here in the Dead Space T6, it has problems at the final room. I've also got the Phantasm, still got the Phantasm, which is a great ship, which really helps sport out. Well, I mean, it can do the ratting itself, but the Cinnaball, of course, the advantage of it was the high DPS. The problem is, I don't think I'm willing to fly around a ship that's worth so much ISK all the time because it's stressful and it's nervous, and and when you lose it, it's I've got to spend a lot of ISK and time rebuilding it. So I've got myself to the point where I've got the blueprint made. I've got almost all the materials. I will rebuild the Cinnaball at some point soon, but I don't think I'm going to be using it as much. And I'm going to try out some of the things in the game. So what I've done is I've bought myself a Tornado. I've started fitting out the Tornado, starting doing the skills. I will at some point do a video on it. I'm just not in a position to do that yet because my DPS is atrocious at the moment in the Tornado. So I need to get my cannon skills up, and there's a real power grid problem in a Tornado if you want to run a pretty decent fit for it. But look forward to that video. It's an interesting ship. It's something I'm experimenting with. I think actually it will pair up with my Phantasm quite well. So that's something else I'm looking forward to. I'm still going to be pushing towards the rattlesnake, but it's an end game goal. I'm realistic. It might be months away before I get to the rattlesnake, um, because on top of that, I've made further. Well, I don't think I've made a mistake, but at the same time, I invested a lot of ISK. So basically, all my ISK at the moment is sitting in assets. A to build the Cinnaball. So I did this BP. I've got most of the materials, but that's almost a billion in materials to build it. Um, I also made a Gila blueprint, which I thought would be a nice investment. I have um, I have it. It's a lot of ISK. It's 1.6 billion. I need to sell it for to break even on it, and every time I go to sell it, I end up with the same problem: is that there's someone putting it on the market at 1.5 billion. I've done my maths over and over again. It's 1.6 billion to break even. There's nothing I don't know how people are selling it for 1.5. I assume they're getting the debris from Dead Space themselves and then just undercutting the market. Um, which I suppose is always a problem in Eve, but the problem is I don't want to list on a 1.6 billion blueprint on the market because if I have to change the price, the repricing, it is an absolute nightmare. Um, so I'm sitting on a BP, which I'm still trying to get rid of to get my ISK back on it, and so that's left my trading alt with less ISK. So I've started trading again, but basically start trading from 100 million. I'm doing a bit more blueprint manufacture, so I can do that quite efficiently. So there's bits and pieces going on, but it's been a bit slow. But I'm looking forward to the Tornado. I'm also looking forward to T9. I'm not too far away from it, um, and I've certainly got my eyes on a Dominix, I think, for the T9 battleships. But I'm thinking, well, there's going to be stuff there. So I don't know. This week's been a bit slow and a bit rough for me, hence the lack of videos. But I have to say I'm still really, really happy with the support everyone's been providing. That's been fantastic. And so I will be doing a giveaway shortly. I'll probably do a separate giveaway video for that. But thank you all very much for your support, and I'll get straight on to the clearing of Dead Space. So I've been running it in the background here. Effectively, this is Blood Raider T6 Dead Space. All Dead Spaces are the same. They're going to have 3 rooms. That's different to the Scouts and Inquisitors, where they have 2 rooms. You're going to have to clear 3 rooms of multiple waves. This one took me, I think, an hour and a half to clear. I'm sure people can do much quicker, especially if you've got faction battleships. They're enormously useful. The rats themselves, straightforward. They're not. They're the level of whatever you go in at. So for the T6, they're T6 rats. So they're going to be mostly cruisers here, cruisers, frigates, destroyers, that sort of thing. They're fine to deal with. The problem in all Dead Spaces, not the problem, what makes them difficult are the elite ships you're going to come across. So, and that's also what gives you the loot. So there's no loot boxes to get in Dead Space like there are in Scouts and Inquisitors. You get all your loot from the elite shipwrecks, because you'll get the C-type loot, that's the blue loot, and you'll get ship debris, which is worth decent ISK from any of the any of the different races in Eve, Echoes. Obviously, Garistas are the most profitable because their wrecks are worth huge amounts. But I understand I haven't done Garistas Dead Space. I've done Serpentis and Blood Raider, but I understand they're all effectively the same. It's just the different ships you're going to face. Blood Raider, I didn't have a real problem with. What you face in Blood Raider space is difficulty with the newts, in that they'll neutralise you, run out your capacitor, and what the elite ships, as we can see here now, forming up, are going to be a Dark Cruer, and that's the faction frigate, and you're going to have the Ashimu, the Dark Ashimus, and they're going to hit pretty hard, and they're going to newt you, which is a problem, sort of a problem. Luckily, I'm running the Cinnabal, which is not so capacitor dependent. Is a bit on the shields, but the Phantasm makes up for it because it uses group shield boosters, which helps out. So this is the tactic I use, and I think it's pretty much a standard tactic to use in Dead Spaces. What you want to do is you want to place a loot box at minimum 150 kilometers. I would say more like 200 kilometers away from the spawn point. So you just fly fast ship out. I use my Phantasm, it can go 1.8 kilometers a second, so I can get it out to about 200 kilometers pretty quickly. And you use that as a warp point, so you need it at least 150. If it's 150 away, you can warp, so you can see those wrecks are more than 150 away. I can warp to those wrecks. But I drop a loot box 150 kilometers away, and then I drop another one 150 kilometers away from that loot box. It gives you options to move away. And then you warp your fleet to that loot box, and you let the rats come to you. And what happens is you'll pull the rats out into a long line. The frigates, generally the micro warp driving frigates, will come to you first. One of those will generally be the elite frigate, and then you can pick them off and deal with them. Basically, if you think about it like in mini waves, you see that I've turned off my auto orbit, because one of the huge mistakes you can make, of course, is when you're dragging them out like this, if you orbit in too quickly on an automatic basis, you're losing the advantage you're trying to gain here. And so what I'm doing is dragging them out, letting them come to you. As you see, this split up, this Corpi Purifier has come to 50 kilometers away from me, whereas the Dark Ashimu is still 120. And it allows you to pick off some of the micro warp driving elites, but crucially get this elite frigate. That's what you want to get rid of. You get rid of the elite frigate, and then you're going to focus on the elite cruisers. So, as I said, in the Dead Spaces, Blood Raider Dead Space, I don't find it a difficulty. I can go up to T7. I can probably solo this with the Cinnabal. You'd use the same technique. You'd fly out, drop a loot box. The rats are going to follow you. You have to take them on, but you want to stretch them out, so you're not basically taking on a whole pack of them at the same time. And once I've eliminated the elites, then I can just throw the ships straight into the middle of the pack and destroy everything with the T6 ships. Everything else really doesn't affect this ship. either of the ships, the Phantasm or the Cinnamol, but the elites, they can, but if they rub me off my cap, it can be problematic. The crew, if I deal with first, it's the same with all the ships. If you have a micro warping elite ship, your tracking's always going to be a problem. And so what I generally do is use an approach system whereby I don't try and orbit it, but I approach it. That reduces the transversal velocity, which means you can track much better and do better hits. As you see, I'm now going to try and take out the Dark Ashimu. There's only one of each in this one. As you go through the levels, you'll have an increasing amount of elites, and what you'll need to do is make sure you plan appropriately. As you can see, the elite ships can hit pretty hard. They're taking my shields down in this one. Equally, the Cinnamol and the Phantasm hit hard, so I'm not overly worried. I've got the shield booster, but again, this gets back to the problem in the Blood Raider one, is that my shield booster will drain my cap. My cap is being drained by the Dark Ashimu and drained pretty effectively, but I know I can take it for the moment, and it's not a huge problem. And all I'm doing there is adjusting my orbit, so I'm giving myself a better chance at the tracking because I was too close and I wasn't landing hits. And something to pay attention to, if you're not landing the hits, particularly with Cinnamol, when I'm orbiting at 3 kilometers, but the tracking is like that, because you've got huge fall off on the medium cannons, you can just orbit out. And so smaller ships I'll often orbit at 10 kilometers and still be delivering very good DPS. The sound of alarms is always alarming. Anyway, so that's how you deal with it, and this is the first level, and you'll find then I'm into the pack and it's not a real problem. The Phantasm's got its group shield booster up, and I'll repair pretty quickly, and the rest of the ships, just they're really not a problem. It is the elites. And something you'll bear in mind. So, for example, I struggle in the Serpentis space because the elites there are the Daredevil and the Vigilant. The Daredevils are not a problem, they're the same thing, very fast moving ship, but if you use the warp can technique you can bring them towards you. The advantage of that is of course there's no transversal velocity, they might be coming at you at a fair pace, but there's no transversal, so you can either catch them, you can generally double web them, and then you can take them out. What I always struggled with, there was a micro warp drive Vigilant in the Serpentis, and if you start chasing it, it holds you at about 30 kilometers and it hits like a truck. And so I always struggle with the Cinnamol against that ship because I could never quite, I could just get it to rage, get a web on it, and then it would sometimes break web and get away from me. And then it'd be also, and, then you need to have micro warp drive, a scram drive in order to take it out. It's MWD, and then you have a very particular fit for it. I end up chasing the ship all around the grid to try and take it out, and so I always had difficulty, and then I would get separated away from the other ships, and then there'd be a problem. So I have to say that was a harder one out of this, but of course the Pentis does make you more risk, because actually the Dead Spaces in Blood Raider aren't the best. I think the Garistas is probably the best, I think. Partly because of the debris price, and partly because blue type loot, because you get lasers and armour, isn't the most expensive loot. You really want the other weapon types, and shields is very good loot. Anyway, so but that's effectively how you grind out Dead Space. It's soloable with this technique. The warp can gives you something you can see. It's 216 away there. It gives you something you can warp out to, and you see I've just drifted away from those ships for a moment. I'm going to speed up the footage now, but it's the elite wrecks that give you the loot, so don't forget to get them. That's what loot. If people are going to come in and try and steal your loot, that's what they're going to be aiming for. So it's good to try and pick it up as you go along, but with this technique it's not always possible. But yeah, so you're going to do this. So I'm going to speed up this footage now to take us through to the next wave. So one thing you got to bear in mind is that as you warp into the next level, you are going to warp straight into the pack of rats. There's nothing you can do about that. There's no option to warp in at a certain distance. So that's something you got to bear in mind, particularly if you're going to start using battleships, battle cruisers, if you're going to be slow moving, because effectively you're going to have a pack of rats on you straight away. It's important because, as you can see, you get scrammed and webbed immediately. Well, not quite immediately, but very quickly. That's not a huge problem perhaps in a T6 Dead Space, where I don't really have a problem taking down the entire pack of rats. The Cinnable could do it itself without a problem. It is a problem in higher levels, because if you're warping into a T9 or a T10 and you suddenly have a pack of rats that can do some serious DPS to you, it's something you got to think about. That's why generally T9s, T10s, in fact T8s as well, I will do as part of a fleet and we'll share the loot. I know there are people out there who can solo T10s. That's great for them. I can't, and as I've already talked about, I'm not willing to risk my faction cruisers as much anymore because the simple cost of replacing them is, well, it's just too much stress and too much effort for the game to constantly have to replace them because of my own mistakes and the mechanics of the game. Well, it is what it is. But so I mean, effectively here it's fine. You see, I've gone out. My Phantasm's going out to drop a loot can. We should see it appear shortly. I haven't got the auto orbit on, which I forgot, which is why I drifted the Cinnable out a bit, but that's okay. This is not a difficult wave to deal with. So what you have to remember is when you jump into your first Dead Space, you're going to jump straight into the first wave. They're not going to have an elite. Then you go into the second room, it's not going to have elite. When you jump into the third room wave, it is going to have elites in it, and you're just going to jump straight into it, and that is the wave that I find and I think is the most difficult, because you're not properly set up to deal with it. You're effectively jumping straight into a brawl with the elite ships. That's what makes Dead Space difficult. If you have the ability to drop a bubble ship, Mo Guardian, something like that, then maybe you can just drop in and basically tank all the damage. That's a perfectly valid tactic, and I've seen that done, and I've done that with people many a time. When I'm doing this effectively, it's not solo. I recognise when I'm using two ships. There you can see my loot cans down, which is giving me my warp point. In fact, I'll leave a Phantasm out there. There's no point. And I'm going to go there. That's a fair chunk out. I've put it. The reason is as I string them out towards me, the distance between me and that warp can becomes less, and remember you need 150 kilometers as a minimum to warp. So the last thing you want to do is be engaging a wave you can't quite handle or an elite you can't handle, but you're 140 kilometers away from the warp can, which means you can't warp out to it to get yourself back to safety. So again, I'm just going to speed this up. There's no need for me to talk through all of this. The tactics are the same pretty much for each wave. And just to show you again, when I kill the last one, I warp out to the warp can. In fact, Phantasm's going out to drop a second warp can to give me a backup in case I need it. I can sit out here because I'm 230 kilometers away. I've got time. This is partly why Dead Spaces take time. If you can tank the entire waves, then you're going to do them much quicker. this is effectively the safe way, maybe even the boring way to do it, but it is the safest way I've been taught how to do it, so I thought I'd share it with you and just show you again. You warp out to it, drag them out, wait for the fast moving, particularly the elite frigate, to come to you, so you take them down first, because the last thing you want to be doing is taking on an elite frigate and an elite cruiser at the same time. In later waves, the number of elites increases, so you start off generally facing one elite frigate and one elite cruiser. You will eventually have more, and then I think the final wave will have, well, I'll show you how many they've got when we get to the final wave. I'm fairly sure it's like 2 and 2, might be 2 and 3 to deal with, but you'll have increasing amounts of elites to deal with. It's something to bear in mind. This is again how the tactic works. You drag them out. Again, I'm going to speed up the footage now. So this is the final room of the Dead Space. This is when you jump in. You've got to be careful as you jump in to a wave which has elites in it immediately. So this has got the elite frigate and the elite cruiser, and you'll see this is not the best way of dealing with it, but I'll show you anyway what happens, because I decided to try and brawl the entire group. On reflection, what I should have done was try and fly immediately away from them, both ships, drag them out, deal with the ones that could keep up with me. And the problem is, of course, is this: almost immediately I've got 2 webs on me, 2 scrams on me, I've got 2 noses and 1 newt, so I'm in a fair bit of trouble. As you see, I'm almost at half armour. But the real problem with the Cinnabon, and one of the things that is bothering me, is the cost of it, because it costs so much to effectively have a glass cannon, huge amounts of DPS, but it just is not tanky. Even this tankier fit that I use, it's not that tanky. This is a T6, and so they've got me down to armour. I'm not overly worried. I try not to panic. It's really about trying to work your way through the problem. You've got to think quickly. So I'll have the Phantasm group shield up. I've got a medium shield booster. As long as I can hold off the primary damage, get rid of one of the elites, my view is I can deal with it. Part of the problem is I'm hitting 2 different ships at the same time. Ultimately, it is manageable. They get me down to half hull, so there is a bit of panic. Well, not panic, but there's a bit of stress involved in it, and it's something you've got to look out for when you're doing these Dead Spaces. You might be able to do the first 2 rooms and think you're absolutely fine, but jumping into this final wave, you have to be careful, particularly if you have a ship who I have both these ships can move fast. I should have realigned and got away, dragged them out like I would do on any T10 storyline, and just dealt with them individually. Tanking them, it was a bad decision. One that at least didn't cost me the ships. Got close, but didn't cost me the ships. But if you're jumping in, let's say with a prophecy, you need to be aware, how am I going to get away from this pack? How am I going to get that distance? Can I tank it? Can I get the distance? Can I do what I need to do? If you're one of the battle cruisers, like the attack battle cruisers, again you've got to think about how you're going to handle this. So you firstly is knowing that this is a problem, and secondly being able to deal with it. As you can see, my Cinnabal's cap has been taken down to 0, which is a bit of a problem. But I'm far enough away. I've moved the Cinnabal far enough away that it's not an immediate problem here. So I'll speed up the first of the footage. You'll see it is survivable, and again, just goes back to the usual pattern of dealing with Dead Space. That's not how I suggest to deal with that first wave of the third room. If you're able to get away and drag them out, by all means do that, rather than trying to tank it. If you can tank it, then by all means tank it. But bear in mind, you'll be surprised at how much damage that can be done to you early on and very quickly. And so once that wave's over and dealt with, you're back to just the standard pattern of dealing with the Dead Space. Go back to the warp can, drag them out, give yourself time and space to deal with it. It's all at that point very manageable. The final wave will have more elites in it. I think it has 2 frigate elites and 2 cruiser elites. It's a little bit harder to deal with, but as you'll see, I've kept this footage sped up to get through it. It's the same principle. You just deal with it in exactly the same way. You just got to make sure you focus your fire onto those elites and deal with them, which isn't, I don't think, particularly difficult. It's just something to bear in mind when you're dealing with them. And finally, I want to deal with the thing you've got to look out for, and that's loot stealers. I see I've got a newt who's appeared in the system and was there for a while. I'm fairly sure they're stealing loot. I'm fairly sure at some point I saw their frigate warp away. It's something to keep in mind that is going to happen as soon as I saw them. I changed my tactic and I went back to try and grab all my elite wrecks because that's what they're after. It's a little bit harder to loot steal in the dead spaces because they need to pick up the elite wrecks, which are often surrounded by other debris, and so they could potentially navigate between it all, but they're at high risk of being decloaked. I'm fairly sure that's what happened here. I'm fairly sure I didn't get robbed of anything, but it's something to bear in mind. Watch out for those loot stealers and keep an eye on your loot. So this is the loot from the DS6 that I completed using my two characters. We'll see how good it is, because I've not even looked properly myself. I anticipate it's pretty decent. I was grabbing it. I think there was a cloaky someone trying to grab some of the loot, so I had to grab it quite quick. So beam lasers, 5.7 million each. That's two of them. Medium beam lasers, I actually don't think they're worth that much. No, it's a shame. That's 2.8 million each. I'm just doing this on the calculator as we go. And I got 3 of those. The small pulse lasers, 13.5 million each. Help if I can type on a calculator. I've got 4 of those, that's pretty decent. Uh, 9 of the medium pulse lasers. 5.2 million each. It's another 50 million-ish, just under. These medium remote arm repairers, I know they're worth a little bit, but they're not worth loads. 2.8 million, it's alright. Times 5 of those. The small arm repairers, I think they're pretty decent. 4 million. Two of them. The medium armor repairers. Now we're talking. 30 million. There's 3 of them. The heat sinks. I genuinely don't know how much these are. Oh, they're not great. Times 3 of those. I think the adaptive armor hardener's decent. 14,700. And there's 3 of those. The reactive ones will always be a bit cheaper. Yeah, they are cheap. Times 3 of those. And then there'll be the Blood Raider ship debris, which isn't the best, but 100 million each. So that's 400 million. So I make that at 693 million, which is not bad. That's Dead Space 6 loot. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. as always, really grateful for the support, the comments, the likes, and the subscribes. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much, and catch the next one.